Hey, welcome back to the Motorcyclist Podcast. This is where we talk about motorcycles and what makes them great. Episodes constantly change on this show, but the one thing that always remains is two-wheeled fun. In this episode, we are going to talk about a bike that is actually no longer for sale, but is still for sale in a way, and that is Indian's FTR, their standard. So before we do that, introductions. It's just two of us today. We've got Adam Wahid, editor. You've got me, Justin Dawes, executive editor. And Jeff is out hiking to waterfalls in Arizona. So he had some vacation planned. So we'll check back in with him when he gets back. So let's talk about the Indian FTR, Heed. Definitely an outlier in what Indian has been when it came out, for sure. It's inspired by the FTR 750 race bike, which is no longer being raced due to rule changes in AFT, American Flat Track. But during that time frame, there was this huge focus on flat track, and flat track was big. And so, Indian went back into racing, built a super rad flat track bike that just dominated for quite a while. And they built a 1200cc street tracker inspired by that. So, but it was short-lived. 2019 to 2004, only 5 years of production. And in those 5 years, it changed quite a bit. So they didn't make any big announcement about cutting it from the line. It just was like a very short line on a PR or a press release that it wouldn't be returning for 2025, and that's it. So obviously there's some issues with that bike in terms of it maybe it didn't sell well or some other things. So let's get into it. Have you ridden that bike, Heed?
Yeah, I've ridden that motorcycle. Yep. Yeah, I rode it in 2019, and then I rode the other version with the 17-inch wheels later on, a couple years later. So yeah, I've ridden that bike a good amount.
Cool. So we'll go through the details real quick. We'll keep it short, and then we'll just talk about. I personally really like that bike, but we'll get into it here in a sec. But 2019 was the first model year, and it was called the FTR 1200, and there was the FTR 1200S, which was like an upgraded version with some extra stuff. But it was powered by 60-degree liquid-cooled 1203cc V-twin that originally was based on the Scout, but there wasn't really a lot of Scout lift in it when they were done. It had like new crankcases, it had new cylinders, it had a different bore. It had a lot of different stuff going on with it. So it was 80% changed. I would say it was really not based on it, but I guess they started with a Scout and then ended up where they ended up with this more modern, quite I don't know if I would say European feeling, but it was quite different than any other Indian engine. Would you agree?
Yeah, no, I think the European, it had some KTM 1290 vibes or 1090 vibes in there, for sure.
For sure. It made 120 horsepower claimed. On our dyno, it made 111. So pretty strong engine. I think 79 pound-feet of torque is what it put out with a claimed 84. So a pretty stout little engine that had tons of torque and pulled really hard. It had ride modes, which, it had a rain, a street, a sport, and then it had a track mode, which removed ABS. And that was on a touchscreen TFT dash, which was quite small and cool looking. And it really modernized kind of Indian in a way that we hadn't seen before. Because it was flat track inspired, it ran on a 19-inch front wheel and an 18-inch rear wheel on Dunlop DT3R tires. They were dirt track looking tires for the street. So they weren't asymmetric like a dirt track tire. They kind of, the pattern went the same way, both sides, but it looked very dirt tracky. Some other interesting things, had an underseat fuel tank. The airbox was underneath the tank cover. And it looked very much like a oversized flat track bike, long, kind of low, but also wide, tall bars for flat track, and it was cool. And then 2020, they came out with the FTR Rally, which was like a scrambler version, had a little longer suspension, but they took away the touchscreen, they took away some adjustability of the suspension of the S, and to me, it was actually maybe the first hint that Indian wasn't real sure of the direction they wanted to go with the FTR. They kind of were like, oh, scramblers are cool right now too. We'll just take this thing and make it into a scrambler, I guess. Right?
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Well, they had in 2019, they had a little bit of a scrambler type variation. If I remember correctly, it was the FTR 1200, and you could put a couple accessories on there and kind of make it a scrambler, which it looked like a scrambler.
That's true. They did. They had some accessories for that. And I think that scrambler was actually available even earlier in Europe. But either way, it was kind of, it was quite different than the flat track styling. So in 2022, they changed the name to just FTR. They dropped the 1200 and they put 17-inch wheels and tires on the bike to make it more street focused, handle more like a standard rather than this flat tracker and scrambler thing that they had going on. It got less suspension travel, but they smoothed out the throttle response. And it was probably overall a better bike for the street than it was before. And then 2020, they had different versions of that. They had like a sport model or an S model. They had a collab with 100%. They had a collab with RSD for a Super Hooligan tribute bike. But 2024 was the last year. But if you go to the Indian website right now, they're still on the site, which means there are still some in dealers.
Yeah.
So
must be,
which is interesting. So, and then, so then they killed it. And, like we said, it wasn't a big announcement. They kind of just didn't, like, we had to actually really pay attention to catch that it wasn't coming back for 2025. And, maybe like some Euro 5 plus emission stuff might have made it more difficult with down sales. All these factors came together to probably not make it desirable for Indian to produce the thing anymore, which I feel is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
Because I like the bike a lot. So.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it didn't really sell well for them. So if it didn't sell well, you got to cut it.
You got to cut it. Business is business. So you could still get a 2024 model, $13,500 for the standard and $18,500 for the RSD Super Hooligan. So with that, that's kind of the story. It's such a short, compact story, and there was a lot of development in the bike. It was kind of a passion project for some of the Indian crew that worked on the flat track bike, worked on this bike. And you could see there was a lot of work and passion put into it, and it just didn't click for some reason, which was a bummer. So,
because it did generate a lot of buzz.
Oh, a ton of buzz. I mean, we
it had a lot of buzz before.
We got an opportunity to ride it way before it came out. We rode a prototype bike and did a video with it, and it got millions of views. Like, people were excited about it, and then no one bought it. It seems like, which is always the thing. You got to turn your concepts. You have to be able to capitalize on them, I guess. Otherwise, they got to get cut. So
yeah, it's strange how sometimes things look good on paper and people are into it, but then like once it actually comes out or happens, it's kind of like wah wah. You see that not often, but every once in a while, and it's always kind of just interesting why that happens,
Yeah. So let's talk about maybe we'll go in stages about the bike of us riding it. So let's talk about the 2019 model when it first came out. What did you think of it when you first rode it?
Well, first off, I really did. I like the styling from afar. Like the proportions on the motorcycle were very nice. That clean tail, everything looked tidy. It looked aesthetically really good a little bit away from it. But then once you got closer, I really, my always pet peeve was just the way that the engine looked. There was all these like hoses and wires and just the engine covers. It didn't really match the proportions and the overall visual aesthetics of the motorcycle, in my opinion.
Yeah, well,
but at the same time,
really good looking tank and tail section that was pretty polished and nice looking, and then everything below it was really
even rough. Yeah, I agree. Like even the frame, the trellis frame looked okay. The trellis swing arm looked okay. The front fender, the headlight cowl, the hand, everything looked good. It's just that engine was very unsightly, in my opinion. And in a way, the engine did look cool because it was a big engine in the same type of way the KTM leader class V twin is really cool because it's big. It's big, like it's a big engine, and they don't really make big engine motorcycles anymore. Harley Davidson does a little bit, but even those are getting kind of slimmer. But so aesthetically, it had a big engine, but just when you looked up and close, you saw hoses and wires, and just the covers were it didn't match the sleekness of the rest of the bike.
Yeah, the top was, like you said, was very sleek, and the bottom was rough. Even like the engine covers were like sandcast looking. They were magnesium, but they were like sandcast looking. They didn't look machined or nice. There was like a voltage regulator that was hanging off the side. It was just, it was
exactly, yeah.
But riding
and like the casing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, the casing too. If you remember, it had like these weird protrusions. Like it had like weird protrusions that like it really was unsleek, and which is crazy because the rest of the bike was sleek. So it was like, what,
Yeah, exactly. But when you're riding it, you're not looking at it. You're not looking at the engine. So what about riding the thing? What did you think when you actually hit the road on it?
Well, it was cool that they had that, you mentioned the European feel, and that V twin, it certainly had an old Ducati L twin or a old LC8 KTM engine feel. It had like an old European V twin feel, which was right around the time where all those European V twins were going away, except for KTM, but they were going away. So it was interesting that Indian Motorcycle is kind of continuing that legacy, which was, I thought was really neat, and that bike had that nice short wheelbase, and it liked to wheelie, and it was like a fun little hooligan bike.
Yeah. It was like this, it was longer than like a normal flat track bike, but it was still felt pretty short. It had a really short swing arm, so it would wheelie actually pretty easily. And it just, it was really rowdy and fun, and it had a character to it that, you didn't expect from Indian at that time, where they were just making cruisers. You had chieftains and chiefs and which were all great American style cruisers. And then you had this thing where you sat up on top of the bike, and it had these big wide motocross type bars on it. And it had these tires that would squirm and do all kinds of weird things. And, it was really, really fun to just screw around on, put it in track mode. You could back it into the corners. And it had really strong engine performance. Like you said, like it had this European feeling engine that just like it pulled really hard off the corner, and then it just revved pretty far, and it didn't seem to sign off too early. And, it was really, really fun. I even rode it on the track. We hit at, Hack Day Track Day. I went around the track on the thing quite a few laps, and I had a good time on it. So it was a blast. It was a bit sketchy when you were going fast, but I think that was the whole point of the bike, is to just hit you in the feels with pretty solid performance, but also give you a little twinge of danger to it.
Yeah. Just that concept was so different for Indian Motorcycle. Like you said, they were just making these long and low cruisers, not really meant for performance. The whole street tracker phenomenon was, I thought in 2019 that street tracker thing was going to actually be a thing. Like I thought, Harley Davidson was kind of going to make a street tracker, and that whole like idea. I mean, remember Roland was making those custom bikes that were all kind of street tracker-ish, the Triumphs and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then he was going down the road of hooligan flat track. So everything he was doing had that hooligan flat track style. And then Harley, the Bronx, I guess is what it was called. It was people are still lament that it wasn't ever built. Like, I think, Harley missed the boat on that one because there's so many people. But then again, maybe Indian proved their point that people want it until it's available and then they don't want it.
Yeah. I mean, I was kind of isolated because it's almost, now we're talking about it, that hooligan flat tracker, street tracker thing. Maybe that was more of an isolated, American Southwest, West Coast thing, because at that time it was really popular down here, but really popular in Southern California and really popular on the East Coast is two different things.
Yeah.
So,
sure. Absolutely.
And, so maybe it was some of that, but yeah, that FTR it was cool to see something different from Indian. And from that aspect, it worked pretty good, for something that they've never really done before. And yeah.
Yeah. The FTR 1200S was my favorite iteration, which was one of the first ones. And then, the Rally, kind of like this weird, like half step that didn't really work because it was like a scrambler, but it wasn't because it didn't really work that great off road. It just didn't work really, So did you ride the Rally?
I didn't ride the Rally, but I rode the FTR, and it didn't really work off road very well at all. It had that hinged incompatibility between the front end and the rear end. But it was so funny it didn't really work off road because like aesthetically it it would totally work off road.
Yeah.
But like it just had that weird hinge, and it was so low too. It was like low, you always like had to worry about like you're gonna hit something.
Yeah. So and then the change in 2022, like with the 17-inch wheels and stuff, it definitely changed the character of the bike. It made it a much better street bike, way better to live with every day. But for me, it kind of lost that character and that appeal that came with that character. What about you?
Yeah, I don't know. I think in 2022 we did a ride on it, and honestly, I preferred the old version with the 1917 better. I guess it did maybe lose its character. It just, I don't know. It almost in a way, I wouldn't say it even seemed more awkward because it had street tires that didn't squirm anymore. But it did kind of just maybe the other motorcycles advanced very rapidly in that 3-year period between 2019 and 2022. Because I remember in 2022 it was like wah a little bit, but it was cool. They added that S variation with the carbon fiber and the O-leans. That was neat, but it really didn't do much in performance. But it did look cool.
Yeah, it looked really nice with all that carbon fiber and the gold O-lean stuff on it. It looked really good. The Super Hooligan special bike, really cool looking, paint job by Roland Sands, kind of cool looking wheels and stuff. But it just, I don't know, maybe it made it too easy to ride. It just vanillified the thing is the easiest way to put it. It became, before it was like some crazy ice cream bar you got off the truck that, had bubble gum and weird stuff in it. And then they changed it and it was just like, it was just a regular ice cream bar, vanilla. You were like, oh, cool. It's good. I like it. But this thing was way crazier. And I really look back at that thing much more fondly. So,
yeah, I mean, that's a good point. They kind of almost not watered it down, but obviously it wasn't selling right in its street tracker configuration. So they were like, oh, how can we spend the least amount of money to make this thing more appealing to U.S., power sports riders? And that's probably let's put 17-inch wheels in it and street bike tires, and it should be better. And yeah, maybe it was better in that sense, but for like the motorcyclist purists like us who want something different and rowdy, it wasn't that anymore. And that's probably why, why it didn't seem so awesome anymore, just because it was more like the other bikes at that point.
Yeah. And I think that was the curse of that bike, is the enthusiast weirdos loved it for what it was in the beginning, but there's not a lot of them. And then it went to something that kind of got lost in the mix because it was like everything else. So it never found its real successful place, unfortunately, which is a bummer because I think it was a great bike. But at the same time, like we said, it was kind of niche. So, oh well. So what I'm surprised is that engine never showed up anywhere else. Like you would think that they would have like, okay, well, let's take this engine and let's put it in something else and maybe bore it down to a small bore and, put it in some sort of naked thing or something. But nothing ever else came with that engine, which is also pretty interesting in these days of shared platforms, right?
I mean, you make a really good point, Justin, because, like, who knows? They had this. Obviously, like you said, they based some things around what they had, but still, they had to invest quite a bit of money into that powertrain platform. And for them to not reuse it in something is very, very odd. You're totally right. Like almost like a more sporty, like a sporty Scout, like a sport variation Scout almost.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of crazy. We never really saw like something like that,
Yeah, Scout Naked or something that was just maybe higher performance, even something with like a bikini fairy on it or something that covered up some of that ugly engine architecture, but well, American
they could still do it though. Like look at
they could
still do it though. I mean, look at the resurgence of the Neo Sports Cafe, the Cafe Racer class. Like, Honda's got one, Yamaha's got one, Suzuki's got one now. That could be like a cool. Again, it's kind of going back to a niche, which maybe Indian already proves that the niches aren't good. But in theory, it has the pieces to make a little Neo Sports Cafe type of motorcycle.
Yeah, for sure it does. But yeah, I think maybe for Indian, bread and butter, American cruisers, like chromed, shiny, comfortable. Don't worry about performance too much. And we're all good. We're going to sell tons of them and we're going to have nice margins and everyone's going to be happy and we don't have to take chances, And the current economic climate right now, no one's taking chances. Everyone's kind of let's wait and see. So, I think your time as a product planning manager right now might be a little boring because everything's on hold.
Yeah. Well said, dude. Well said.
Yep. All right. Well, I think this is a little bit shorter one today, but I don't think that's because the bike wasn't cool or wasn't important. I think it was a really big step inside of Indian to step up and do this thing and really lean on that racing space that they had for a while with flat track. So it's a noteworthy model.
Do you think one of these bikes will ever become a collector's item? Because they couldn't have sold that many,
Yeah, possibly. Maybe an S, I think so. Like you said, like 20 years down the road, I think people are going to look back at those things and go, oh, those are like really cool. I think I want to try to find one. And then the prices will rebound on them and they may become collector's items, I really enjoyed it. So, I could see more people thinking about it later, and going, oh man, that thing was cool. So.
Yeah, things are so cyclical too. Like that street tracker phenomenon that never really amounted to something. It's still, who knows what's going to happen in 10 years? Like electric street trackers. Now that's a thing. You don't know. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the future something happens and that's a thing again.
Yeah, motorcyclists were a fickle bunch, unless it's a cruiser, and then it's steady Eddie. So, with that, we're going to wrap this one up. But the FTR, it really tapped into the excitement of Indian returning to flat track racing. It was rowdy. It was fun. It was a bit impractical, but that was the entire point of that motorcycle. And somehow it just didn't really catch on. Indian tried to remedy it with changing it to more of a streetable machine, but that didn't help. And in the end, it was cut. And that's a shame because it was a really awesome machine. And with that, we're going to wrap it up on this one. Thanks for listening. If you like what we're doing, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this with your friends if you enjoy listening to what we're doing. And comment down below what you thought of the FTR. If you thought it was cool, if you thought it was a big flop, or anything in between. And we will see you on the next one.